very warm welcome to Africa. Good morning. It's a brand new Monday, and we are so excited to be broadcasting the news making headlines across Africa. My name is Aina Raizakoya, and alongside me is Ashwin Berry, and we will be in your company from now until 8 a.m.
Yes, indeed. And today is World Pasta Day, not the one who was preaching yesterday. Pasta, the one you eat. The day celebrates one of the world's favorite and most versatile foods. You have probably eaten pasta at one time in your life. Chances are you eat it several times a week. But what exactly is pasta? This carbohydrate-rich food is made from unleavened dough that comes from durum wheat flour. The flour is mixed with water or eggs and then formed into sheets. Pasta is cooked by either boiling or baking. One of the most amazing things about pasta is that there are over 350 kinds. World Pasta Day is proudly brought to you by Pasta Polana.
You see me through the filtered lens, fading the edges of my thoughts, reminder of my innocence before it got lost so deep in the forest of our youth. We carved our names upon a tree, inside a heart that spoke the truth. I still hear it beat. We are wild.
Welcome back to Africa. Good morning. In our top stories, deadly blast in Uganda, a terrorist act, says the president. Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni said Sunday that an explosion in the capital Kampala that killed one person and injured 5 was a terrorist act and vowed to hunt down those responsible. Museveni said he had been briefed that 3 people left a plastic shopping bag at the scene that later exploded, killing 1 person and injuring 5 others. It seems to be a terrorist act, but we shall get the perpetrators, Museveni said in a Twitter post on Sunday. He said investigators were still combing the bomb site and more details would be released later, including advice for the public about the dealing with these possible terrorists.
After African mediation, Eswatini king calls for calm. Africa's last absolute monarch on Saturday called for calm and dialogue in the Kingdom of Eswatini following a visit by regional mediators to try resolve the national crisis and deadly unrest. Formerly known as Swaziland, the country has been rocked by demonstrations that broke out in June and have prompted authorities to deploy the army and shut down the internet. The latest flare-up has run for more than 2 weeks, spearheaded by students, civil servants, and transport workers. His traditional Prime Minister Themba Gininza said via the government's Twitter account that King Mswati III has announced that a process of national dialogue will be initiated after an annual ritual ceremony that starts in November and usually lasts several months. Police said 37 people have died since the violent anti-monarchy protests first flared. The government also restored internet links on Friday, 2 days after it had pulled the plug on most access.
At least 20 people killed as Somalia troops battle moderate Islamist militia. At least 20 people were killed and more than 40 wounded on Saturday when a moderate Islamist group clashed with Somali government troops over control of a town in central Somalia, according to witnesses and regional officials. The clashes started at dawn Saturday morning when government troops who have been amassing on the outskirts of Guriel, a central Somali town some 400 kilometers north of the capital Mogadishu, attacked bases held by Alu Sunnah wal Jamaa rebels. According to residents, both sides used heavy artillery, mortars, machine guns, and vehicles-mounted anti-craft guns during a fierce battle in the streets. Speaking on the condition of anonymity, military officials from the opposing sides told VOA that both sides suffered fatalities. None of the two sides is in full control of the town yet. One witness told VOA, "We can hear heavy gunfire and shelling. The government soldiers are positioned at strategic bases at the heart of the town."
UN forced to abort humanitarian aid flight into Ethiopia's Tigray. A UN humanitarian aid flight destined for the capital of the Tigray region in northern Ethiopia was forced to return to Addis Ababa due to airstrikes on Friday, raising serious concerns for the safety of staff working on the ground, said the UN's emergency relief coordinator in a statement. The airstrikes in Tigray's capital, Mekelle, Tigray region, threatened the safety of UN staff who are simply there working to help civilians in humanitarian need, said Relief Chief Martin Griffiths, who heads up the Humanitarian Affairs Office, OCHA. He underscored that all precautions must be taken to protect civilians and civilian infrastructure. Under international humanitarian law, all parties to the conflict must take constant care to spare civilians and civilian objects from harm, including humanitarian personnel and assets, the emergency relief coordinator spelled out.
Armed attacked groups prison and release hundreds of prisoners. A group of heavily armed men broke into a prison in Oyo, Nigeria on Friday night and freed hundreds of prisoners, confirmed a spokesman for the prison administration, without mentioning whether there were any deaths or injuries. A large number of armed men attacked Obongo prison with grenades on Friday night, said Olarewayu Orojin, adding that the many escaped prisoners have already been found. Details of the operation will be released later by the police, he said. However, the local press said that almost 1,000 detainees were released during the attack. Nigeria, the most populous country in Africa, faces a serious condition of insecurities, and large areas of its territories are affected by the activities of criminal groups.
DRC Angola, reopening of borders. The imminent reopening of the borders between the DRC and Angola was the subject of talks between the ambassador of the Republic of Angola in the DRC, Miguel da Costa, and the Minister of Regional and Francophonie Integration, Didier Mazenga Mukanzu. The interview with the minister revolved around the friendly, cultural, ethnic, and good neighborly relations which bind the two peoples, namely Congolese and Angolans. We also raised the issue of immigration and border security, declared Mr. Miguel. Seizing this opportunity, Minister Didier Mazenga also took the opportunity to inform the ambassador of the progress of the work of the large DRC-Angola Joint Commission, which will take place in Kinshasa from Tuesday 27 October to Thursday 29 October.
China donates 269,000 worth of food products. The Chinese government on Thursday donated food products valued at 20 million meticais for people displaced by armed violence in Cabo Delgado in northern Mozambique and promised to support reconstruction. The Chinese side is willing to participate in the interrogated development of the North and encourage the active participation of Chinese companies in building infrastructure, said Wang Heyum, China's ambassador to Mozambique, during a ceremony to hand over the donation. The Mozambican government, the donation will significantly alleviate the suffering of the population displaced due to attacks by insurgent groups in that province and prove the strength and vitality of cooperation relations between the two countries. The donation will have a profound impact on citizens who are faced with the arduous reality of seeking alternative means of survival, said Manuel Goncalves, Mozambique's deputy minister for Foreign Affairs and Cooperation.
Tshisekedi orders investigations against anyone who shakes up tribal fibers for separatist purposes. Felix Tshisekedi instructs the Minister of Justice and Keeper of Seals, Rose Mutombo, to open judicial inquiries against any person or group of people who shakes up the tribal fiber for separatist purposes. In his communication, Felix Tshisekedi said that tribalism is one of the major causes of the general inversion of values and of ruin in the Democratic Republic of Congo. He deplored the fact that this scourge resurfaces and that it is more and more conveyed in songs and acts performing during demonstrations and or through social networks. Consequently, the President of the Republic instructed the Minister of State, Minister of Justice, and Keeper of Seals to open judicial investigations against any person or group of people who shakes up the tribal fiber for separatist ends, so that the authors of the tribal declarations answer for their acts before the judicial authorities.
70% of women present stage 3 and 4 of breast cancer. A clinical oncologist consultant at Gaborone Private Hospital, Dr. Seba Tuchiapo, has revealed that more than 70% of women visit health facilities when their respective breast cancer have already reached a progressive stage. He was speaking during the breast cancer awareness campaign held under the theme, Give Hope, Save Lives. The event was organized by the Fighters Support Group in Francistown recently. Breast cancer remains the leading cancer globally, causing the most significant morbidity and mortality amongst women. Dr. Chiapo stated that more women go to health facilities when their cases have reached stage 3 and 4 respectively. This, he said, meant that it is crucial to arm them with appropriate information in order to make informed decisions to ensure that they timely visit healthcare facilities. He added that countless lives were lost unnecessarily due to the misinformed and unguided decision taken by some patients, as well as the systematic delays in health system.
Accident kills 10 people in Chibia. 10 people died yesterday and 4 others were seriously injured as a result of a collision between 2 vehicles on National Road 105 in Chibia district in the Huila province. The injured were taken by the INEMA team to the Central Hospital of Lubango, where they received medical assistance. According to a hospital source, condition of the wounded is serious, but the medical team managed to stabilize the patients. Now in Luanda, 1 death and 1 serious wound are the result of a collision between 2 vehicles, followed by the overturning of one of the cars, registered yesterday at 6 a.m. in the Zango Urban District of Viana Municipality. Preliminary data from the Traffic and Road Safety section of Viana indicates that the 2 victims are National Police agents. The officer with serious injuries was taken to the Zango Hospital, where he is hospitalized.
Boat operator warned against non-compliance. The Department of Marine Services and Marine Police has warned boat operator against non-compliance with set standards of water transport. Speaking during the meeting, Director of Marine Services, Captain John Omango, said the aim of the meeting was to sensitize boat owners on the importance of safety regulations on Lake Malawi shipping operations. If regulations were followed, the incident that happened in Usisia could have been avoided, or no one could have lost a life. Thirdly, the incident claimed a life of an Anglican clergy. According to Mango, it was established that apart from overloading, the boat was carrying passengers on a cargo boat which did not have adequate safety gadgets for passengers, which is contrary to regulations. Chief Surveyor of Vessels Wilson Luani explained the detailed procedures followed in acquiring and certification of vessels to be used on Lake Malawi and all the waters of Malawi.
In the last of our top stories, elephants in Mozambique may never develop tusks due to civil war, constant poaching, finds study. A hefty set of tusks is usually an advantage for elephants, allowing them to dig for water, strip bark for food, and joust with other elephants. But during episodes of intense ivory poaching, those big incisors become a liability. Now researchers have pinpointed how years of civil war and poaching in Mozambique have led to a greater proportion of elephants that will never develop tusks. When we think about natural selection, we think about it happening over hundreds or thousands of years, said Samuel Wassa, a conservation biologist at the University of Washington, who was not involved in the research. The fact that this dramatic selection for tusklessness happened over 15 years is one of the most astonishing findings. The tuskless females ate mostly grass, whereas tusked animals ate more legumes and tough woody plants, said Robert Pringle, a co-author and biologist at Princeton University. These changes will last for at least multiple elephant generations. Really sad news, truly. All right, this is Africa Good Morning. We continue to bring you the news as it is. We have so much more for you after the break. Nedbank Namibia recently hosted a virtual panel discussion, Pandenomics. I love it when two words are put together. Nikki Weimer, the senior economist of the Nedbank Group based in South Africa, talked about growth opportunities, commodity prices, and the tug of war between the US and China, and what all of this means for Africa. Have a look.
They're probably going to start with is they're going to start tapering their bond purchases. They've signaled to the market that this is going to start in November, and they'll probably start to wrap it up by the time we get to about middle next year. Now, this will have significant consequences for emerging markets. Now, tapering will affect emerging markets in two ways. The first way in which it will affect emerging markets is that as the US start to mop up all the liquidity it injected into the system, it's obviously taking dollars out of the system. And that means that dollars will strengthen and all other currencies will weaken against the dollar. That's one area where it will affect emerging markets and sub-Saharan Africa. And then, of course, the other area is markets will generally anticipate that once the tapering is done, at some point or the other, US interest rates will start to normalize. Now, the US interest rate is essentially at the moment near zero, at 0.25%, as is many other advanced countries. And really what that means is, remember that US interest rates, that's your risk-free rate. And if that starts to go up for your risk-averse investor, it will probably be a far better option just to put their money in the US, park it in some conservative investment and get a higher return because US interest rates are going up. Why, under those circumstances, take the risk of going to countries like Namibia, like South Africa, like Sub-Saharan Africa, where the risk is much higher when you don't need to take that risk? So that could also impact on emerging markets. This graph really shows you the channel through which the normalization of US interest rates could affect emerging markets. Most likely through a stronger dollar, through rising US bond yields, and through higher US interest rates. That will all affect emerging markets. It will affect capital inflows to emerging markets, which could cause currency weakness, and then at the same time, of course, result in higher inflation. For countries that have borrowed heavily, which is almost the entire sub-Saharan Africa, in order to deal with COVID, all governments have increased their borrowing, and you've seen debt burdens rise. And of course, what that means is if that debt is in dollar-denominated terms, it could result in surging debt service costs, which could be very problematic for a lot of countries in the region. Now, in response to this, in response to both higher inflation and in response to the anticipation that the US is now going to start normalizing monetary policy and that could make many emerging markets vulnerable, we have seen that many emerging markets have started to move their interest rates higher. South Africa hasn't responded yet. And as a result, Namibia hasn't responded yet because Namibia's monetary policy is tied to that of South Africa. But South Africa is probably going to start normalizing monetary policy. The Reserve Bank is indicating they'll do it in November. We don't think that's going to be easy to justify. We can't rule it out completely. The market's already pricing it in. But we do think that they will normalize, pushing interest rates up 100 basis points during the course of next year. And then that clearly will have implications for Namibia as well. So globally, just to wrap up, where are we now? What does it look like? Well, the world economy is recovering. This is the IMF's latest numbers. It's their July update. That's their outlook. Their latest numbers are very similar, slight downward revision to this year's world growth. That green bar there, they've got it at 5.9%. They've revised US growth down quite a lot for this year, from 7% to, I think it is 6%. So there's been some downward revisions. For China, they've also edged it down slightly from 8.1 to 8% for this year. But overall, the picture remains very similar. So the IMF believes that the recovery will continue, that the rate of recovery will normalize but still be quite robust next year. And in their forecast beyond 2022, that is when they really got growth slowing to more normalized levels of around 3.5%. So they're still looking for fairly robust next year. But their downside risk, and the downside risk comes primarily from the rise in inflation, the global shortages, high global energy prices, and especially the anticipated change in US monetary policy, which could unsettle the markets and could in fact pose a threat to emerging markets and to sub-Saharan Africa. There's also a lot of opportunity elsewhere for Africa in the way the world is unfolding. Now, at the moment, it's been very difficult for Africa, for Namibia, for South Africa, for many other countries like Kenya, where China plays an enormous role. We've been in a very difficult position because there's been this real hostility between the US and China. That is not going to go away. That's going to be with us. It's going to be a challenging environment to negotiate for the whole of Africa, given that China's got such an enormous role and plays such an enormous role on the continent. But there are also incredible opportunities here for Africa. We see that in the US, they are pushing to accelerate spending on infrastructure in general. If you spend on roads and bridges and schools, you need cement, you need building materials, you need steel. For that, you need iron ore, you need bauxite, you need all sorts of commodities. And of course, Africa produces a lot of those commodities. The other theme we've seen coming out very strongly in both the US and in the EU is this incredible focus on accelerating spending on the transition to green energy and to green and sustainable transport systems. Now, green technology uses about 30% more commodities than your fossil fuel alternatives. So that is going to create demand for commodities. So even though commodities will not continue to climb at the pace that it has, which has been absolutely spectacular, it will start to moderate a little bit and move sideways. There's no denying that. But our sense is that commodity prices are actually going to be more resilient than the market is currently anticipating, especially those commodities that are used very extensively in your sort of renewable technology and renewable energy and transport technology, which is your coppers and your cobalts and your lithiums and your phosphates and so forth, and your rare earth minerals. And many countries in Africa have those minerals. Not so much South Africa. I think Namibia is in a better spot as far as that's concerned. But many of them do have those minerals. And so it should present an opportunity for Africa going forward. So yes, there's good news. World economy is recovery. Bad news in that there's a lot of downside risk building up, especially through inflation and the anticipated change in US monetary policy. But there's a longer term trend here, which is the drive to improve infrastructure in your advanced countries, particularly in the US. There's this drive to transition to green and sustainable energy and transport systems, which is going to create demand for the type of products Africa produces.
Welcome back to Africa Good Morning. Now, yesterday, Zambia celebrated its 57th Independence Day, and sadly, this was without the late founding father, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda. To tell us more is Mike Sichula.
Like you've likely put it, yes, yesterday Zambia celebrated its independence, the 57th, having gained independence from colonial ruler Britain in 1964. And that struggle was led by Dr. Kenneth Kaunda and other freedom fighters. Some are present, some have passed away. They managed to, in the picture there, that is the vice president. On your right, that is on your left, that is Mr. Enoch Kabindele. He was the vice president in the era. On the middle there, that is the immediate vice president. Mrs. Nonge Winner. On your right, Dr. Nevas Mumba, a former vice president as well during the era of the MMD administration. They were invited for the ceremony at State House yesterday, among other political parties that were present. And during this event, President Hakainde Hichilema was celebrating his first independence as a head of state. He did honor former founding father of the UPND, Mr. Anderson Madozoka, who died in 2006. He honored him with the eagle of the Order of the Zambian Eagle, which is one of the highest medals that can be bestowed on an individual in the country by the head of state. Then we have a video where President Hakainde Hichilema spoke to the media after he did some of the rituals of the Independence Day celebrations.
And then for the colleagues that are here, who were presidents, worked hard to advance the agenda for the little country. And now we carry on with that agenda. And we believe that now our focus is unit of purpose to deliver, one, reunification of this country, two, that's it. That's it. And I invite all Zambians to unite, to work together. It doesn't matter what our differences are. It doesn't matter. Those differences are minor. Things that unite us are more than those that divide us. That's all. That's the
Thank you very much, and very best of luck. Thank you very much.
There you are. That was the President Hichilema at the National Memorial Park, where Zambia's former presidents who are later have been buried. And he went to see, and he also went to see because this is where Dr. Kaunda was buried most recently. And this is what happened yesterday. And today is a national holiday commemorating Independence Day because the day fall on a Sunday. Hence, today, Monday, is being observed as a national holiday.
All right. Now, this week on Friday, the new administration will present its national budget amidst high expectations from the general public. Could you please get into this?
Yes, this will be the first UPND formulated budget, despite it maybe having had some other submissions from other people who pushed in their submission before the August 2021 general elections. But in terms of presentation and national oversight, this is the first UPND formulated budget. In the picture there, that is Dr. Stumbeko Msokotwane, who is the finance minister. And he is not it is not his first time to be finance minister. He was finance minister in the administration of the MMD that was led by former president Pierre Banda. So among Zambians, expectations are high. They want to see whether this budget of the UPND is going to respond to the promises that were made. One of the promises that were made is that reduced cost of fertilizer for farmers. Is this budget going to provide this solution? Because the price of fertilizer in Zambia is high. The policies on the mining sector. So the expectations are high amongst different sectors of the economy. So this Friday is one of the big days for the UPND and the Zambian public with regards to what will be outlined in the budget.
Understandably so. Now, briefly touch on Zanaco Football Club being eliminated from CAF Champions League in about 2 sentences, please.
Zanaco eliminated. They have dropped into the Confederation Cup. The good part is that Late Arrows that played against Primario de Augusto of Angola, they managed to qualify to the playoff rounds because they held on to that match, drawing 0-0. But they had won the home game 1-0, so they have progressed to the next round.
All right. Thank you very much, Mike, for bringing us that comprehensive report from Zambia.
Thank you very much, Africa. Good morning.
All right, this is Africa Good Morning. Just as Mike said, another thing that we must pay attention to if you want to have a good day after the good morning is the weather. The forecast is up next. How would you know if you have the flu or COVID-19? Should you take both the flu vaccine and the COVID-19 vaccine if these are available to you? How does the WHO decide on the composition of the flu vaccine? Dr. Sylvie Briand explains this in Science in 5.
As flu season is starting in many parts of the world, how would you know if you have flu or COVID-19? Hello and welcome to Science in 5. I'm Vismita Gupta-Smith. We are talking to Dr. Sylvie Briand about flu and COVID-19 today. Welcome, Sylvie. Sylvie, let's start with how would people know if they have caught the flu or COVID-19?
So the flu is very common, especially in this season, and usually the symptoms are fever, headache, muscle ache, but also upper respiratory symptoms such as sneezing and coughing. For COVID-19, it's the same symptom basically, but in addition we have specific symptoms such as anosmia, which is a lack of smell, and ageusia, which is a lack of taste. And many people, especially young people, have experienced this additional and specific symptom for COVID-19. But sometimes people have very few symptoms, whether it's for flu or for COVID-19. It really depends on your level of immunity. What is important to know really for those two diseases is that the prevention measure works for both of them. And especially washing hands is very important. Then ventilation of rooms, when you are in crowded rooms with a lot of people in particular, so open the window. Also wearing mask if you cannot open the window, and maintain physical distancing. And both diseases are really preventable if we apply those measures.
So Sylvie, talk to us about the groups that are most at risk from the flu, and also talk to us about the safety of taking the flu vaccine for those people who do have access to the flu vaccine and the COVID-19 vaccine. Is it safe to take it?
So the group most at risk for influenza are elderly, people with underlying conditions such as chronic respiratory disease, cancer, cardiovascular disease, and these are a similar group as for COVID-19. But for flu, in addition, pregnant women and very young children, infants, are also more at risk for severe disease. So is it safe to administer flu vaccine and COVID-19 at the same time? Yes. We have now few studies that show that it is safe to have both vaccines at the same time. But of course, people need to check with their physician about their indication to take both vaccines.
Sylvie, talk to us about how the composition of the influenza vaccine is decided, and also speak to us a little more about the safety and efficacy of the flu vaccine.
There are many different influenza viruses out there, and actually they change very often. And so what is very important is to know what are the predominant viruses in a given setting, so that we can take the antigen of this virus to compose the vaccine. So that's why we have around the world 136 laboratories constantly monitoring the circulating viruses, and twice a year we have expert meetings to define what are the predominant viruses in certain places of the world. So we have 2 vaccine composition meetings per year, one for the Northern Hemisphere and one for the Southern Hemisphere. So the flu vaccine has existed for many decades, and it's a very safe vaccine. But it's very important to have those expert meetings to define the composition of the vaccine, to make sure that we put in the vaccine the component that will really better protect people against the circulating viruses at a given time. And this vaccine is very recommended to at-risk people so that they can be protected against severe flu and death when the season starts.
Thank you, Sylvie. That was Science in 5 today. Until next time then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stick with science.
Welcome back to Africa. Good morning. It's time for us to dive straight into your economic news stories. We start off in Angola. Investment in tourism can boost the national economy. Tourism is a sector that could become one of the many pillars for the growth of the national economy, with significant contributions to the gross domestic product and the complementary role of the oil, agriculture and fisheries sectors, said the Secretary of State for Tourism, Helder Marcelino. In an interview with Jornal de Angola, he expressed that the sector can play an important role in the revival of the country's economy. Therefore, the Secretary of State understands that it is necessary to promote investment in tourist resources and beaches, and that people can travel without restrictions within the restrictions of the COVID-19 pandemic. Tourism is a transversal sector. For its development, it is necessary to interconnect with the sectors of transport, energy, commerce, as well as the creation of projects aimed at education and the implantation of the culture of ecotourism in Angola, said the State Secretary.
Sama Lukonde removes charges for 2G phones. The Prime Minister Jean-Michel Sama Lukonde announced the abolishment of the mobile device register levies of 2G phones pending further investigation for the issue. After the outcry as well as a debate in National Assembly, the Prime Minister announced his decision to abolish the collection of RAM for the second generation 2G telephones, which according to him involves 75% of subscribers. The Prime Minister instructed the Ministers of Post, Telecommunications and New Information and Communication Technologies to execute the said decision in the best possible way. During the debate on the RAM file, several national deputies of the ruling party as well as the opposition had called for the abolishment of this tax, which they qualified as a scam.
Now in Lesotho, LEC switches off airport over debt. The Lesotho Electricity Company has switched off power at the Moshosho I-1 International Airport over a staggering 3 million debt. Tumeleng Cheke, the spokesperson of the Ministry of Public Works, which manages the airport, confirmed that the LEC had switched off electricity at the airport. She, however, could not confirm how much the ministry owes to the LEC. The LEC disconnected electricity at the airport on October 1 in an attempt to push the ministry to settle the debt. Airport General Manager Sekonyela said the current situation at the airport is highly regrettable. The power crisis at the airport has added more woes to the airport, which has in the past faced severe criticism that it no longer meets international standards.
In our next story, Mozambique watchdog wants 2 billion debt relief from guilty Credit Suisse. A Mozambican public finance watchdog is demanding an estimated 2 billion in full debt relief from Credit Suisse. That is 10 times more than what Swiss banking giant is willing to write off. The statement was made in response to a settlement reached by the Swiss bank with the regulators in several countries over a corruption in Mozambique, Keystone SDA news agency reported on Thursday. There was no immediate comment from Credit Suisse on Tuesday. Under a settlement reached by the US and UK authorities, Credit Suisse agreed to forgive 200 million in debt owed to the African nation. The charges related to almost 1 billion in bond offerings and a syndicate loan, which Credit Suisse helped to arrange between 2013 and 2016. The funds were destined to finance a state tuna fishing industry and develop maritime security in Mozambique.
Well, that brings us to the end of our economic news stories. Up next, economic indicators. Welcome back to Africa. Good morning. It's time for us to dive into the sports stories with Ari Holhada. Ari, listen, the stars are aligning. I don't have to check a horoscope for that. Manchester United lost, Arsenal won. For me, the alignment doesn't get any better. But to get into that and more of the sports stories from the weekend.
Yes, indeed. It was a busy sporting weekend, and some results that don't happen in decades. So I'll touch on that real briefly. On the soccer, on the cricket, let's start with the cricket. It's the World Cup. Obviously, Namibia qualified on Friday to play in the Super 12, so called, and it's 2 groups of 6 now, and the 2 best teams go through to the semi-finals. So you can't lose too many. You can lose and come back, but the results from the weekend, real quickly, is that Australia beat South Africa. That was by 5 wickets, and then England beat the West Indies. West Indies, the defending champions, and England too strong. They beat them by 6 wickets with 70 balls still to go. And Sri Lanka beat Bangladesh by 5 wickets, and then yesterday Pakistan recorded one of those sporting results that don't happen too often in decades. They beat India by 10 wickets. India never lost a cricket game in T20 to anyone by 10 wickets, and Pakistan has never won against India at the World Cups. So that was a good result for them. Today it is Afghanistan against Scotland. Tomorrow, a big game for South Africa. They play the West Indies. They cannot lose anymore. And then on Wednesday, it will be Namibia that play against Scotland. So lots of cricket happening, T20 World Cup happening at the moment. On to some soccer news or football news. The big result from the weekend was yesterday, astonishing result. It was Liverpool that beat Manchester United at Old Trafford by 5 goals to 0. And that is a massive result for Liverpool. It's the biggest, equally biggest defeat ever in the history of Man United at home. So that was impressive performance by Liverpool beating Manchester United. So that means that Liverpool, Chelsea and Manchester City, they're on top of the lock and they get pulling away from the other clubs. Look at Chelsea, also impressive when they demolished Norwich City by 7 goals to 0. So they on top of the list, 9 games, 22 points. And then Liverpool just won back 9 games, 21 points. Manchester City also beat Brighton 4-1. So they in 3rd place on 20 points. And then lower down, Man United 8 points behind the leader now on 14 points. And Arsenal did great. They started off the season with 3 losses. They pulled back now. They're equal with Man United at the moment on 14 points. They beat Aston Villa at home by 3-1. So that's the football news. And on to some Formula One racing news. Exciting, very exciting Grand Prix yesterday in Austin in the USA. It was the US Grand Prix, of course, at the Circuit of the Americas. Max Verstappen, he won the race in the end, a very tight finish with Lewis Hamilton just behind him. Lewis Hamilton got past Max Verstappen on the start, and but then when they went in for their change of tires, their pit stops, it was Max Verstappen that got past Lewis Hamilton, and he held on in the end for a close win, but just a few seconds or less than a second in the end. So the championship points is now very close. Max Verstappen opens up a little bit of a lead. He's on 287.5, Lewis Hamilton 275.5, so 12-point difference. But lots of races to go. There's still 5 Grand Prix races to go. It goes all the way into December. So the next one is 7 November. It's the Mexican Grand Prix. Then it's Brazil. And then they finish off with the 3 races in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Abu Dhabi. So still 5 races to go. So lots to race for Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. Also some rugby news that happened over the weekend, some internationals that was played. It was Japan that hosted Australia. And Australia didn't play that well. It was a tough win for them. They won in the end 32 points to 23. That's a once-off test. And then in Washington, it was the USA that hosted New Zealand. New Zealand didn't actually play their best team. That only one team member played in that team that played against the Springboks. But they demolished the USA. It's not good to see for Gary Gold, the former South African assistant coach that coached the USA, but the USA lost 104 points to 14. So that was not good for the USA. New Zealand winning there. New Zealand go on now to play next weekend. They play against Wales. Their European tour starts the 30th of October. They play New Zealand, play Wales, and the US will play against Ireland. And just to finish off quickly, a great athletics road running result. Ethiopia's Letesenbet Gibi Letta Sembet Gibi, she broke the world half marathon record the weekend in Valencia, the Valencia half marathon. That's Gibi there. She also holds the world records in the 5,000 and the 10,000. She came in 62 minutes and 52 seconds, and she broke the previous record by 70 seconds. So a massive achievement by Ethiopia's Letta Sembet Gidi, new world record for in the women's half marathon. So that's all the sporting results of the weekend. I hope your team did well. We'll talk again on Friday and preview all the results, and all the best for all the cricket games and for Namibia playing on Wednesday. We talk then. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Adi, for bringing us the sports news updates. We're going to take a short break and we'll be back with your headlines.
Strike it gold and win 5,000 Namibian dollars in cash with Neo Paints. Simply buy Neo Paints products from the selected range and stand a chance to get one of 12 mystery buckets filled with gold paint. All 12 winners will each get 3 extra paint buckets equal to their purchase. One to replace the gold paint, the second to use on your project, and the third to give to a charity of their choice. One winner can score another 10,000 Namibian dollars by showing us your creative use of the golden paint. The best project wins the cash. Offer is valid from 27 September to 18 December at your favorite hardware store nationwide. Visit us at neopaints.com for more competition details and follow us on Facebook for weekly competition updates. Neo Paints, a coat of excellence.
Every weekday, Africa Good Morning streams live from 7 a.m., bringing you the news from the SADC region and beyond. Now, if you perhaps missed our top stories at the top of the hour this morning, worry not, here are the headlines. Deadly blast in Uganda's terrorist act, says President. After African mediation, Eswatini king calls for calm. At least 20 killed as Somalia troops battle moderate Islamist militia. UN forced to abort humanitarian aid flight into Ethiopia's Tigray. Investment in tourism can boost the national economy. In the T20 World Cup, Australia beat South Africa and England won comfortably against the defending champions, the West Indies. Those have been our stories.
Thank you very much for joining us on Africa Good Morning. We do welcome your remarks regarding our show. You can email them to us. Our email is agm_2centsworth@nmh.com.na. Alternatively, we are on Facebook and Twitter. That's at Africa Good Morning. We also have a website. It's called One Up 2. What's even more amazing is that we give you the list of all our shows, so what time they are playing, and if you check out that program, then you will know when to catch your favorite NMH show. Thank you very much for joining us, and on that note, it's all our love, all our light.
Until tomorrow, Suraj Kanaka.